When I refused to co-sign my sister's $10,000 car loan, my entire family stopped talking to me for 2 months. 2 months without a single call, message, or birthday wish. At first, I felt the familiar tug of guilt, but then reality set in. I had done nothing wrong. Then, one afternoon, my phone buzzed. A message from my mother: "I need $8,000 by Sunday." I could almost hear the panic in her typing. I read it, put down the phone, and let the room's stillness fill me. The sun slanted through the window, hitting the desk, the stacks of papers, my coffee cup. Everything seemed strangely calm, almost cinematic. I tapped out one line: "Sorry, I don't talk to strangers." And then I put my phone face down. The house was quiet, but inside, something shifted. For the first time, I felt the slow, satisfying tingle of control. No anger, no shouting, just the quiet calculation of what would come next. I'm Lily, 28, and I've always been the responsible one. My younger sister, Cara, is bright and impulsive, the type of person everyone instantly likes. My parents adore her, often forgetting that responsibility has a name, and it's mine. Growing up, I was the kid who handled school projects, homework, and minor family emergencies without complaint. If something broke, I fixed it. If someone forgot, I reminded them. And when money ran short, I quietly figured out a way. I never resented it, not at first. I told myself it was love, family, duty. But patterns emerge. Every time Cara needed something, an extra tutoring session, a car repair, a last-minute loan, my parents' eyes went to me. "Lily, can you handle this?" They never asked her to take responsibility. They didn't even ask me if I wanted to. I was a background fixture, expected, dependable, invisible. At work, I'm meticulous, logical, precise. As a financial analyst, I see problems before they escalate. Yet at home, my foresight went unappreciated, my skills taken for granted. I often wondered if my parents even noticed the quiet sacrifices, like the hours I spent ensuring bills were paid or debts managed. And now, with the $10,000 car loan, the same story repeated. Cara's mistake became my responsibility, my family's expectation. But the silence of the past 2 months made me realize something. Responsibility is not consent. And for the first time, I felt the stirrings of something I had rarely allowed myself, an inner refusal, quiet but undeniable. The silence in our house had been deafening for weeks. My parents avoided eye contact at dinner, their conversations clipped and hollow. Cara, blissfully unaware, continued as if nothing had changed, scrolling on her phone, laughing at memes, asking casually, "So, you still not talking?" Her tone was light, almost teasing, but it cut sharper than any argument. Every glance from my mother felt like judgment. A raised eyebrow here, a sigh there. My father muttered under his breath about family obligations, always stopping short of saying my name. At first, I tried to fill the gaps, offer explanations, mend fences, but their attention was elsewhere. Each request, each passive-aggressive comment, was a reminder. I was being punished for saying no. Small betrayals piled quietly, methodically. Cara asked me to pick up her dry cleaning. Mom left me a stack of unpaid bills on the kitchen counter, clearly expecting me to handle them. Even the neighbor, aware of the drama, casually mentioned, "I guess you're helping with Cara's car," as if I had no choice. I began to notice the little cinematic details, how my father's jaw tightened when Cara spoke, how my mother's hand shook slightly while placing her coffee cup, the way Cara's phone lit up and my parents instinctively checked it before looking at me. Each moment a tiny, deliberate reminder. I was expendable. By the end of the second week, the tension had become a living presence in the house, thick and silent. It no longer needed words. I realized, quietly but fully, that their disrespect was not just about the loan, it was about control. And for the first time, I let myself imagine reclaiming it. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was stacking mail at the kitchen counter when my mother muttered, "If you don't help Cara, don't expect any family loyalty from us." I paused, the envelope of bills trembling slightly in my hand. The words didn't sting the way they used to. Instead, clarity hit me like sunlight through a dusty window. Enough. For years, I had been the family's silent problem solver, the one expected to fix mistakes, smooth over crises, and absorb guilt. Every time I said yes, it came at the cost of my own peace. Every time I refused, I became the villain. I realized that the resentment I carried wasn't theirs. It was mine, tied to a lifetime of bending until I broke. The pivotal moment was small, almost absurd in its simplicity. My father glanced over my shoulder at the bills, then at my mother, and back at me. "You'll do it, won't you?" he asked, the casual menace in his voice finally audible. I didn't speak immediately. I just set the bills down, slowly, deliberately. Then I did something I had never done before. I smiled, calmly, as though the weight of decades had finally lifted. "No," I said, softly, with no trace of anger. "I will not cover Kara's car loan. Nor will I handle any of this again. That ends today." I saw the shock ripple across their faces, the way water shivers when something heavy drops in. It was not dramatic. There were no raised voices, no slamming doors. Yet it felt like a seismic shift, earned after years of silent endurance. For the first time, I was free, and I knew the consequences would come. But this time, they would meet me, not the other way around. I did not plan revenge in anger. I planned it the way I handled everything else in my life. Quietly, logically, and with precision. If my family believed I was their safety net, then the first step was to remove the illusion without creating chaos. As a financial analyst, I understood contracts, liabilities, and long-term risk. I reviewed every financial tie that connected me to them. Shared subscriptions were cancelled. Informal loans were documented. Any future requests would require written terms. I made sure no one could guilt me into verbal promises again. I created boundaries the way one builds a firewall, clear, unemotional, and difficult to breach. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped justifying my decisions. Silence became my strategy. When they hinted at money or responsibility, I responded with polite distance instead of debate. I also prepared socially. I updated my emergency contacts. I separated family obligations from personal priorities. I made sure no one could frame me as reckless or impulsive. If they tried to paint me as selfish, I would let my consistency speak instead of defending myself. There was no dramatic confrontation. No announcement. No threats. My revenge was not about humiliation. It was about control, dignity, and consequence. I knew they would eventually need something again. They always did. And when that moment arrived, I wanted to be ready, not with anger, not with emotion, but with calm certainty. Because the most powerful response is not shouting. It is preparation. The message arrived on a Sunday afternoon. My mother's name lit up my phone after 2 months of silence. No greeting. No apology. Just urgency wrapped in entitlement. "I need $8,000 by Sunday. The car broke down. This is important." I stared at the screen for a moment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. The house felt still, almost expectant. I typed slowly. "Sorry. I do not talk to strangers." No emojis. No sarcasm. No explanation. A few minutes later, the calls began. Missed calls stacked one after another. Then messages from my father. From Kara. From an aunt who had ignored me for weeks. Their words shifted in tone, confusion, irritation, persuasion, quiet panic. I did not respond. That evening, I imagined my mother standing beside her silent car, frustration tightening her jaw. I pictured my father recalculating plans he had always assumed I would fund. I thought of Kara realizing, perhaps for the first time, that her safety net had vanished. There was no dramatic fallout. No screaming. Just the slow, uncomfortable realization settling in. Their choices had consequences. And for once, I was not the one paying for them. As I set my phone down, I felt something unexpected. Not triumph, not cruelty, but a calm, steady sense of balance. The story had shifted, quietly, without spectacle. And they were finally forced to read it. By Monday morning, the silence was deafening. No frantic messages. No calls demanding explanations. My phone rested untouched, and I allowed it. Word had traveled quickly through the family grapevine. My mother's frustration was palpable even from my distance. She tried subtle guilt trips through other relatives. "She's so stubborn, can't she just help us?" But the message no longer reached me. My father muttered behind closed doors, pacing, frustrated that the usual path of pressure no longer worked. Kara texted friends with thinly veiled panic, realizing the money she expected to appear magically would not materialize. For the first time, the roles had shifted. I was no longer the convenient solution to their problems. No longer the fixer, the silent provider, the unquestioning supporter. Their entitlement collided with reality, and it was unsettling for them. I, meanwhile, felt an unfamiliar weight lift. The resentment that had simmered under years of expectation began to ease. My self-worth did not hinge on rescuing others. I was learning that boundaries were not cruelty, they were clarity. Why should anyone care? Because this is the story of reclaiming your life without spectacle or rage. True revenge isn't about shaming others publicly. It's about standing firm and allowing their choices to reveal the truth. It's the quiet, undeniable power of refusal. And in that stillness, I finally understood. I didn't need to fight them to be seen. I only needed to stop being invisible. Weeks passed, and the quiet didn't feel empty, it felt intentional. The tension that had defined every family interaction for years began to dissolve on its own timetable. I wasn't chasing apologies or explanations. I was simply living my life, free from the weight of obligations that were never mine to bear. I began noticing the subtle changes in myself. Decisions felt lighter. I spoke up without hesitation. I invested energy where it mattered: my career, my friends, my own stability. The people who had expected me to solve their problems discovered something I already knew. I was no longer their automatic answer. That realization stung, but it was theirs to feel, not mine. Looking forward, I planned cautiously but confidently. I would support those I loved, yes, but on my terms, not through coerced duty. Boundaries became my armor, and in them, I found clarity. I could forgive without compromising myself, observe without entangling, and live without apology. The lesson was quiet, almost imperceptible to anyone watching from the outside. True revenge, I learned, isn't in exposing someone or humiliating them. It's in reclaiming your life, in walking away with calm certainty while the chaos they created circles them. And so I smiled one evening, alone on my balcony, sunlight brushing my skin. I no longer waited for validation or gratitude. I had something far more enduring: freedom. The last message I ever sent on the matter was simple. I wish you well, but I will not be your safety net again.